So, welcome back to the Love That Whoa. Murni Jama? Okay, try again. Welcome back to the Love That Journey Mama podcast. I think this is episode 5 now. Hey.
Hey,
Halfway
look at
to
us.
10. I don't know if that means anything. And Ashley and Sam here. Unfortunately, we don't have Nicole today. She was 100% planning on being here. But, as I've experienced, as we all have, like, health has just been out the window. So she's not well, can't be here today. But as soon as she can, she will be back because she wants to be here, just can't. So we're just going to keep rolling with it. With a bit more of a serious topic today. We're going to start exploring and sharing about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, what we've experienced. I mean, I only have the one experience, but Sam has 2 between her 2 kids. So yeah, this will probably be something we talk about a fair bit because there's a lot to say and there's a lot of people that we know that would also like to chime in on their experience, and hopefully hearing what we have to say might help others feel like more seen and less alone in this part of motherhood. So cheers, Mama.
Cheers.
What did you bring today?
Oh, I just bought myself this. It's an early Mother's Day gift from the dollar spot at Target, but it says a mother like no other.
I love that.
And it's like it's glass.
It's glass.
So I have water in it right now because I know you could probably put hot beverages in it, but for whatever reason it makes me nervous. So
no, I think I'd be the same way. I also don't have a hot beverage. I have the rest of a can of Spindrift in here. Because I was like
we're on a talk show where they have their coffee mugs, but there's not actual coffee in there.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe I need to clean our Keurig. I don't know much about it. But every time somebody else has used it for coffee and then I go to use the hot water and it's it's not clean water.
Oh yeah, you should probably clean it.
Is it because I don't know, maybe there's a filter situation I need to clear out?
So we don't have one. We have an old school 90s drip pot coffee thing because especially after the kids, we used to be fancy and do French press. And when it was just me and Eric and we were like, la-di-da, we'll take half hour to make our coffee in the morning. We would freshly grind beans and then we would boil the water. It was a whole thing, right?
That's fancy.
And then Julian was born and we were like, we just need cheap, fast coffee.
Yeah.
So we make a pot of coffee every morning just to,
that's
survive.
Honestly, that just brings me back because my parents still have that same style. And growing up, I feel like the sounds and the smells of the pot and the little noises it makes me think of childhood mornings. So
yeah, and it's the same thing. I think this actually came from my parents. When they got a new one, they gave us this one. It's just a basic Mr. Coffee pot, and Eric always wants to get a new fancier, nice one. And I'm like, why? This does what we need it to do. So, but we do have a Keurig at work, and that is something that I've bought for our office. Is the Keurig cleaner kit. Because it gets pretty gross. So that might be something you need to do.
I think because we got ours for from our wedding shower years ago, and I think with the intention that Brian would do coffee from home because he used to be Starbucks guy, and but then he didn't really do that, and then I don't drink coffee, so it became more for other people when they were or hot chocolate or something, and I like having tea or lemon and honey water or whatever. But one day I noticed I'm like, that water is not right. And I always have to run it twice at least to get the cleaner water. I'm like, I'm missing a step here. Gross.
Well, there's stuff out there, but yeah.
So
Well, before we start, so I know this is going to be heavy, right? We're going to talk a lot of heavy stuff today, postpartum,
We're gonna be heavy.
serious topic. Yeah, I actually that's a good point. I should probably
Also
get
for
some.
my cold.
But before we start, my I guess icebreaker of sorts that I want to start off here on a little positive note is I want to share, or I want you to share, I want us both to share a mom win of the week. Start with a win that you had this week as a mom. And if you need a minute, I can start, and then that way it gives you time to think.
Yeah, I think I might have something in mind, but yeah, you go first.
Okay. Pretty simple. But so yesterday I picked the kids up from daycare and we went straight out to a restaurant to eat. It was just pizza, but it was still it's something that I've been dreading since Jamie was born is like taking them both out to a restaurant, especially so close to bedtime. Cause like from when I pick them up to daycare to bedtime is a very small window. And it was just such a beautiful day. And I was like, I don't feel like cooking. And I don't want to also then clean up the mess. And I asked Julian when I was going to pick him up, I was like, do you want pizza or tacos? And he's like, pizza. Because he recently discovered his love for pizza like a week ago. And I was like, cool, man, me too. And so I like was really I was like kind of thinking about it. And then as it got closer and closer to the time, I was like starting to heavily panic that like shit was just going to hit the fan and, you know, there were going to be meltdowns or just not go well. And I started to get all in my head about it. And I was like, we got to do this because I just got to, you know, bite the bullet, take them, go, see how it does. And they were so good. And it was such a good experience. And it was so much fun. And, you know, we got home technically like right when Jamie should be going to bed. But obviously we still needed to like, you know, do the whole bedtime routine thing. And so then there goes my brain again, like, oh no, like schedule routine, we're screwing everything up. And he slept great. He slept totally fine. And it was just like, it was so nice to be proven wrong from all my like pent up worry and anxiety and be like Julian ate so much pizza and he was having a blast. Like I brought food for Jamie because he's doing purees and stuff now, but they were both just like looking around. And every time like someone walked in to get a pizza or like sit down to eat, they were like, watching people like people watch and it was just like to get them out of their like daily, you know, routine or whatever. And for me it was nice because I didn't have to cook or clean, which is always a huge plus. But yeah, it was a win because I was like, we finally did this and like I don't have to worry about it as much in the future now because I feel like we did it. We survived. Like we could do it again. And then we could do it again after that. And like even, you know, every time will be easier. So I'm really proud of myself that I did it and didn't talk myself out of it.
I'm so glad you did that. Now, maybe you said it earlier and I missed it. Was Eric there or just you?
He met us there. So because
okay.
I usually pick the kids up from daycare and I took them straight to the restaurant then. And then he met us there when he was driving home from work. So it wasn't totally long, but I mean, like you know, the initial part I think is the hardest part anyway, getting them, you know, situated. So yeah, it was.
I love it. I feel like I don't know if it's like growing up what we saw or like when you don't have kids you can go out to eat and you maybe see like a chaotic family and it gives us the sense that like it won't be fun or it'll be too stressful. But like Brian and I, when we like love doing brunch, you know, and so we've taken her with a lot, and like it can be really, really fun, really joyful to have that experience. I think like now that you know that it's like you did it and it wasn't so bad, it's like you could do it a lot more, and it's I feel like the kids love it, looking around and but I will say the first time we did it, I was definitely in a panic the whole time. I was like, what if she cries? What if this happens?
Yeah. And you know what I did? So there was one time with Julian when he was a little over 1. And we had done restaurants a few times. We had gotten pretty good at it. I was like, all right, he's pretty good. And then I don't know if it was just like an age thing or a teething thing or like, you know, the phase of the moon or what. But we got out to this and we were on vacation of all places too. We went to this barbecue restaurant, sat down, placed our order, and from the moment we placed our order, he just started having a complete screaming meltdown fit and like couldn't like settle him in any way, shape, or form. So Eric ended up taking him outside. Luckily it was warm out, and just kind of walked with him up and down the block in front of the restaurant. And I had to wait for our food to come out, immediately ask for the box, immediately pay the bill. And it was just so embarrassing at the time because I was like, oh, everyone's like looking at us and judging us. And I'm like, you know what though? Like, who cares, right? Like, we can't be the only people in the history of restaurants to have brought a toddler out to a restaurant who then ended up having a meltdown. And like I think that was part of it too, is I was so panicky after that, and I was like, it happens, right? Like
Yes.
it's not the end of the world. I build it up more in my head than
Yes.
what it actually ended up being. And then same with like, and then when Jamie was born, I was like, all right, we're good now with one kid. Now it's like the whole hurdle of two kids. But they
Yeah,
both
that's
do it.
impressive. Yeah. Well, it's like we haven't experienced, I mean, because she's young, it's like we haven't experienced the restaurant meltdown yet. I'm sure it'll happen and we'll be like scarred a little bit. But yeah, it's nice to do something you love with like your
So.
little ones.
Yeah. So what's
Um,
yours?
oh, she's thinking she's awake. Nope, maybe not. We'll see what happens. I can hear her through the wall. Okay, so a mom win that came to mind was a couple days ago. I did like kind of like a toy reorganization, rotation, whatever. Kind of
Nice.
trying to do it once a month just so that, well, there's like not too much out, but then she kind of sees new stuff. I was really more just like putting things in different locations around the
Yes.
house. And I brought back down, like, we had one of those colorful wooden spinner toys. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, with like the little ball inside to make the noise. Because like a month or two ago, I'd had it out and I noticed that it matched these like rubber colored blocks we had. Like the colors were perfect.
Ah,
So what I would do is like spin it, whatever color landed on top, I'd set the block on there and like try to just be like blue, blue, and pick a
yeah.
blue or orange. So I brought it back down as part of our new rotation and was kind of just showing her again. And I mean, it could have been an accident, but like I did it a couple times and then like I kind of left it. And then she saw the color that was on top and like put the block on there. And I was like,
What?
I'm
Way
like,
to
this,
go,
I'm
girl.
like, this is probably some sort of like accident coincidence, but or she's just seen me do this enough. And it kind of, I feel like we're getting to that stage now where like my modeling of things is slowly starting to pay
Oh
off.
yeah.
Um, and it's
Kids
really
absorb so
fascinating.
much too, and like you don't even realize it because they're not able to communicate for so long. So you're just
Right.
like they're not really like grasping what I mean. But I remember that blowing my mind with Julian. I was like, he's actually like understanding and doing things,
Yes.
and it's like it's crazy because you just kind of brush it off as like they're babies. You know, babies don't know, but their brains are crazy. Like
Yes.
it blows my mind how much that they retain and like are able to do. I don't know. It's just really cool. So
It
cool to watch.
is. It is. I love it. And like I think it felt like a twofold win because it was like an idea I had made up. I mean, it's very simple, but like to make that game out of it, but then to also see her like start to realize, oh, we're playing a game here and this is how you do it.
Very
Um
cool.
so yeah, that was exciting. That felt like a mom win for sure.
Yay!
Yeah.
I have to laugh because I've done the toy rotation too. I was really big on that for a while because
Mhm.
of everything I read on it. Like, oh, like, you keep cycling different toys out for their, like, to get like re excited about things. And I was doing that for a long time and it was working really well. And now Julian is like my Mr. Like, I don't want to say this because I know it's like, like people take it seriously and it's like I'm generalizing here, but he's very like OCD in that regard. Like
Okay.
he now if I try to move stuff, he like loses his mind because like no, this is supposed to go on this shelf. Like and
Mhm.
he like doesn't like now when I switch things around. So RIP toy rotation in this house.
Mm, wants things where they are. But you know what? Like that sense
Yeah,
of order is part of the development too, right?
it is.
So, yeah, I think it could come back around for him. But for now, it's like the fact that he wants order sounds nice to me.
It is it's funny too because when we leave daycare, whatever he's playing with, he like has to put it back on the shelf or back in the box before he leaves because it's like he needs to like close that activity before he leaves. And it like the teachers love it because they're like, he's such a good like helper and cleaner upper. And I'm like, yeah, I think it kind of stems from like this weird internal like anxiety thing because he's
Mm.
like, I need to like complete this task before I do this task. But right now we're just rolling with it, and I'm just glad he likes to clean up. So
Yeah. I'm trying to let go of like because I do find myself just trying to, if she takes one activity out and then it's like as she moves on to something else, I put it away.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just like, I don't know. I'm thinking in my head her brain will function better if it's not chaos, but like now I'm trying to notice maybe she's creating something there, like there's purpose to what she's doing, even if it doesn't look that way to me. Like she had this ball from a separate toy and she placed it on her bouncer. Almost
Mm.
looked like she was like offering it to this stuffed animal octopus that like sits in there. And I'm like, okay, either, I mean, this is either totally random or she like placed it there on purpose. I'm like, I'm going to leave it there and see what happens. And eventually she went back for it and like put it somewhere else. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to like calm down a little bit on the organization.
Easier said than done, but yes, I agree. Kids have their little processed ways of doing things, so
Yeah. And
we're just here to watch.
I don't know about you, but like I was a messy kid. Like I
Oh, see,
made
I was
the biggest
super
messes.
neat.
Oh, you were? Okay. Oh my
And
God.
my sister was super messy, and we had to share a room, and it drove me nuts. Even from a young age, just drove me nuts because I always needed that sense of order,
Yeah.
and she was just like chaos. And to this day, like when I go to her house or she comes to my house, like she makes fun of me for how organized and clean I am. And I'm like, how do you know where your things are in this house? But like, it's not like dirty, it's just mess, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's funny because that's just what stuck, both of our personalities from an early age. And I always laugh because we want to have the boys share a room at some point. And I was like, watch Jamie end up being messy and they're going to share a room and it's going to be like me and my sister all over again.
Did you ever like draw the line down the middle of the room type thing?
No, our room wasn't big enough for that. We had like a trundle bed. So it was like where you like pulled out the one from underneath.
Yeah.
But during the day, it was just like, it just looked like one bed, like a day bed kind of thing. So
Got it.
didn't get to do the whole, yeah. It wasn't like a Disney show where they have like the giant rooms and you do the line down the middle. We had a tiny room, but eventually we got our own rooms and then I had all the organization that I needed. But
Yes.
yeah.
Nice. You know what? I think I need to go give her that decompression hug.
Okay. Should we
Banana.
exit this room then and then start the new room when we then we can go into the postpartum?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so. So I will. Here, I'm gonna stop this recording. Back. The baby is napping for now.
For now.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Let's make the most of it, right?
We will. Okay, should I go first?
Yeah, I feel like I start us off a lot and I feel like I just talk a lot in general. So
all good things though. Yes. Okay, so we're here to talk, I don't know, whatever comes to mind in our postpartum journeys. And I'm sure as we like talk about it more in the future with other people, we'll like think of more things. But you know, hopefully people can find it relatable. Maybe if they're in this stage or they just got out of it, whatever. So I'll say like up front, with postpartum depression, anxiety, I do not think I experienced postpartum anxiety, but I'm not sure. I mean, maybe as I talk about things, it might stand out to you like, actually, that was or that is. I think I fell more on the side of postpartum depression. And I think like maybe at a medium level, nothing too extreme, but also as I've looked back on it, more than I realized it was at the time. Like I was just, last time I talked to my therapist was discussing it. I'm like, yeah, when I look back and think how I feel now about Hattie versus then, it's a world of difference. So I knew like going into motherhood that there was a chance that I would have some sort of struggle with the like just extreme life change, because there's things I've learned about myself along the way, stories for another day, but things that have told me that I could have a strong reaction to that and maybe kind of just fall apart at the shock of it all. And knowing that like what lack of sleep can play in your mental health. So I was prepared that, okay, I might have a hard time here. Um, and I think I did, but like, I don't know. I think so much of it had to do with sleep. And other girls that I know that became moms shortly after me, it was like, that was something I always wanted to say to them. Like, are you feeling crazy? Like, or this or that? It's just blame it all on sleep. Nothing's your fault, the baby fault, your partner's fault. Like, the lack of sleep is going to drive you insane,
To touch on that too, is I remember reading something that like sleep deprivation is a literal form of torture. Like that's used as a form of torture is sleep deprivation. And you go through it every single night as a new mom. So you're literally tortured every single night. In the beginning.
And you might fall, just when you think you've fallen into a routine of like, oh, okay, I'm going to be up at such and such time and such, and my partner's going to like cover me so I can sleep this long. Then all of a sudden something changes, or you have like a bad night or a couple bad nights in a row. So I know that, sleep played a huge role for me in my struggle, and also things with breastfeeding, but not for the reasons that, like, I know a lot of people that have wanted to and struggled with it have. Mine were kind of different, and it sort of made it feel like I didn't always know like who or what to turn to. And even though I was like seeking medical help and advice, there just wasn't much there for me, because like, in a nutshell, and I mean, I'll get into this a lot more when we talk about feeding babies at some point, it's like I had an oversupply, and I had a baby that was spitting up a lot. And, it just, dealing with that much spit up throughout the day when it's not something you're used to. And also if you're somebody that like has always been weary of throwing up, it's just like, it's a lot. Yeah. So issues there. And I think knowing that even though we were kind of trying up from the get-go to do both types of feeding, bottle and breastfeeding, like I felt a lot of pressure on myself that for the most part, I'm the one that has to nourish this baby. And like this stuff came more to a peak when her bottle refusal came in. But yeah, that pressure that so much is on me and there's nothing anybody can do about it. I think that kind of led to some of my postpartum depression. The other part, it's like a sleep component, the feeding and relying on just me. And then the other part was not having the true immediate connection with the baby. And I know, and I'm sure you'll touch on it, like you dealt with that a bit with Jamie, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, all I know is that, of course, I have been in love with her from the start. It's like, I love my baby. I'll do anything for her. But I felt that the other new moms around me were just like enamored with their babies and couldn't hold them enough, couldn't love on them enough. And I felt like I'm fine with her being over there, or I think within the first couple weeks, Nikki, my cousin, came over and took me out to lunch. And I remember telling her, like, yeah, I'm just one of those moms that's like okay being away from their baby. Like I felt very fine about that. And I know that I didn't feel like a true, I don't know, this sounds like sad to, it's like I hate saying it, but it's the truth.
Right.
Like, I have a distinct memory of feeling this first true connection to her when she was around 8 weeks, I think. Okay. And maybe more where I felt like she was giving something back to me and not just...
Was she smiling at you? Because I feel like around 8 weeks is when they start smiling, and it makes a huge difference.
Yes, smiling, maybe it was on the verge.
Okay.
But what ended up happening was I needed to get some dental work done that was very unexpectedly traumatic and painful. And so when I came home, I was a mess. Like I was just like in shock from what had just happened. And I was laying in bed and Brian brought her up and he kind of just put her by me. And she
Mm-hmm.
was laying with me, and we have pictures of it with me just holding her. And I remember thinking, like, oh, this is the first time, like, holding my baby is like bringing me comfort, not just me comforting her.
Yeah.
And I always look back and think like, okay, I think that's when I started feeling a bit of a different connection with her. Um, but in reality, I want to say like our true, like, I know I am just obsessed with you did not come until, I want to say around like 7 months.
Okay, yeah, that
So does
tracks.
that check out?
That tracks with similar, yeah, similar with my second anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and I told somebody that, I forget who, a little while ago. It might have been one of my aunts. And I was like, yeah, not until 7 months. And I think they were like, wow, what? Because surface level, it maybe didn't look that way. But I knew in my head something around that time changed where I'm like, I love you. I'm obsessed with you. I love spending every minute with you, all of that. And I know around that time, things got easier with her, and
Hmm.
she started becoming more fun. And then, we got into the holidays. She's sitting up, a couple months later, crawling. Like things just changed for the better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think not until 7 months. And that's, it's like I hate thinking it took that long. And it's, of course, we had like many great moments, in those first 6 months, but something felt different. And it's like sad to me to know that some people feel that right away.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And it's like now I know, it's like it.
Yeah.
You know when it's different. And I don't know. So I'm slowly kind of working through that of, you feel that sense, a little bit of loss. It's like I was always there. I was, always with her and raising her up, but like, I don't know. It's sad to think I couldn't feel that way for longer. And I will say a sleep regression also played a role in that, because around month 3 to 4, she like finally was sleeping through the night and we'd get these like 12, 13-hour stretches. We're like, this is great.
Yeah.
And then she hit that sleep regression. And so I was back to being up months like 4, 5, 6, I'm pretty sure. Once a night, at least, still feeding her. But at the same time, feeling that pressure of it has to be me because, like I said, she did a bottle refusal. So no matter what we did to fight it, it all landed on my plate. And I
Hmm.
think part of that postpartum depression was just that anger and acceptance of like, it's on you, girl. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure, and I know Brian wanted to do more, but there was nothing we could do. It's like, this is how she was going to get fed, and we just had to live with it. So I think my acceptance was part of like getting out of the depression of, I don't know, acceptance, but also like the confidence in that, that, hey, it's pretty cool that you're this person that can, give your baby everything they need. And yeah, just trying to like take pride in that versus being mad about it.
Right.
So
And that's all very valid. Like, I know you were saying how like you feel bad thinking that way or saying that, but it's like, I think you'd be surprised. There's probably a lot of people that feel the way that maybe are just too ashamed to say it out loud because there is such a pressure from society and even the pressure we put on ourselves as moms that like we have to, be in love with our babies and like how could you ever think that and I must be the only person feeling this way so I don't want to say anything and have people think I'm a bad mom or
mm-hmm.
et cetera. But reality is, we're human and it's a huge life change. And I think a lot of people go into it thinking like, oh, I'm gonna, and that's the thing too, is like these babies are planned, right? Like I can only imagine the feelings you go through that of an unplanned baby because then it's like the added guilt of like, you weren't even expecting it, right? Or like planning to,
Mm-hmm.
like, here's a baby that you wanted, you tried for, you should be grateful for, by
Mm-hmm.
all accounts, it's a healthy baby. Everything's going well on the surface. So it's like, why do I feel this way? And then you feel doubly worse for that too. And then it's like, you think that you're the only person at that time that's having those thoughts. And it's really hard to open up about because your initial fear is that you're going to be judged as a bad mom because other people don't want to share that they're also feeling the same way. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like this whole secret thing amongst moms where it's like, I feel like we all just need to be more upfront about things, more open about things, and we'll realize it's totally normal.
The theme of our podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's like just, yeah, because when you kind of dig at people a little or you share what you're going through, you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, so many other people are feeling this way, and maybe they just like weren't really deeply thinking about it as much or reflecting or like felt shame for feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I feel like it's kind of become my mission of like, let's try to normalize
Yes.
feeling this way and um, not taking everything for surface level. Like, I don't know if you remember me posting it, but like, I feel like when Hattie was around 4 or 5 months, we were kind of in the thick of the sleep regression. And I posted a picture of myself like holding Hattie and she's like crying. And I basically just talked about how like, I'm okay, but I'm also struggling.
Yeah.
And it ended up worrying a lot of people about me, or my mom was like, I didn't realize it was as bad. And I'm like, it's like, I'm okay, but I'm not.
Right. And it's
And
one of those things where it's not really anything anybody can help with in a way. So it's
mm-hmm.
not like you're like reaching out for help and like, that someone could physically step in and do something for you. Because at the end of the day, it's like, it's just something that your brain needs to like figure out how to cope with.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you need to kind of, you know, get there on your own, if that makes sense. Like, because
Yes.
it's the same. I remember posting when Julian was about 8 months old, and it was Mother's Day, and May is also Mental Health Awareness Day. And I remember posting, that was when I first opened up on Facebook about just all my mental health struggles after he was born and everything. And I had so many people comment on it and then also message me privately. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I had no idea. And I'm just like, yeah, because you don't advertise it, right? Like, we
Right.
don't, and that's the thing, it's like, what am I going to do, post about it and then just be like, well, there's nothing anyone can do. So it's just more of a, this is how it is.
Right. And it's like, if somebody asked me, like, well, give me an example of A, B, and C of like, I don't know, explaining the depression of it all, it's just not so black and white. All I know is that one day I started to feel different than I
Mm-hmm.
did before, and I think too, there's whether or not you go back to work, it's like either way, your life is still just turned so upside down. My life is 100% different than it used to be, in that, because I didn't go back to work and won't be for who knows how long. And like that
Right.
takes a long time to accept.
You
And
become like a whole new person, right? It's
mm-hmm.
not just like, oh, I'm who I was plus a mom. It's completely new. Like, your entire identity changes overnight, and that takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot longer to process than like what you think it will take.
Right. Yeah. And I think something I've talked about with my therapist and Brian is I think because I didn't have such a extreme depression, that I didn't think I was almost like worthy of the label, if you will.
Right.
And it's like, no, I was definitely struggling to accept, what life is now.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, I know I feel different because all I want to do is stop the clock, because it's like, I realize that what I have in front of me is just like the best thing ever. And like
Yeah.
mentally, that's how you should feel about a family if, it's something you wanted for a long time. But it's like, can we really be blamed for the shock we feel of getting just thrown into a completely different lifestyle where somebody's relying on you for everything? And yeah, so but also talking's made me realize maybe I did struggle with anxiety when I think of how obsessively I would text questions to friends or people to be like, well, did your baby do this? And da, 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 da. Like, yeah, I used to have a lot of questions. And now I'm like, I can't remember the last time I've asked somebody a question about
Because
baby
you're
stuff.
learning your baby, and
Yeah.
that's like a huge thing, right? Like you know your baby better than anybody else does. And in the beginning, it's a guessing game, and then you rely on other people. But then as you get to
Mm-hmm.
know your baby and develop that relationship, you're like, oh, I know what she needs. I know what this means. I don't. And I have to say, even like, so when I had my second, 1,000 times like better anxiety wise, because I was like
Mm-hmm.
relying on past experiences. I like was more confident in my abilities as a mom, because in the beginning, when you're a first time mom, you're just like, what am I doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. And by the second time, I was like, okay, I've done this before. I can figure it out again. And it's funny how it just kind of like, you don't actively think that, it just happens. So
Mm-hmm.
that was very helpful to kind of have that. Because with Julian, I had really bad postpartum anxiety. With Jamie, I didn't have any really, but it was definitely heavier on the postpartum depression. So it was like, I feel like I got to experience, I got to experience both with each kid. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Well,
fun.
I'm sure I'll think of other things that come to mind as you share what comes to
Yeah.
mind for you. But yeah, why
So
don't
yeah,
you
I
dive
had a lot
in?
of similarities with you when Jamie was born. So I can get to that. But with Julian, I have general anxiety, just always have, as far back as I can remember. And my therapist officially diagnosed me with general anxiety a couple years ago. But when Julian was born, it like skyrocketed, just through the roof anxiety. And I guess at the time I just didn't know that's what it was. I just assumed, again, like you're saying, like the sleep deprivation. We had a lot of struggles with feeding, with me not making enough milk. I desperately wanted to breastfeed. He wasn't latching. I wasn't making enough milk. I was exclusively pumping and just like killing myself with the pump, basically. Like, and then he was colic. He just cried constantly. He had reflux. Both my kids had reflux. Um, so the spitting up constantly, like he wasn't gaining weight in the beginning. It was like all these things were stacked against us, on
Mm-hmm.
top of it also being like peak COVID 2020. So it was like the isolation and the just very unusual experience in
Yes.
general with that, on top of having a newborn who like wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, wasn't gaining weight. I was severely underprepared for how it was going to change our lives. And I think a lot of what fed into that too was like, and you didn't touch on this, but I'm sure you felt the same way. Like, if it changes your relationship, even like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you and Brian had a very solid marriage going into it, solid relationship. Eric and I as well, like best friends, talking about everything together. We're on the same page. Like, he's not one of those, like, oh, my husband doesn't do anything kind of guys, where it's like, I feel like in a sense I shouldn't complain. But yet when you become a mom and it's like your baby becomes that top spot priority, your
Mm-hmm.
relationship naturally suffers, right? It just does. No matter how much you try to avoid it, it does, it will, it happens. If you have a solid enough foundation, fingers crossed, everything ends up okay in the end.
You're
But
just
in the beginning,
passing ships for a while,
right.
right?
And it is, you literally are passing ships in the night, because in the middle of the night you're just like, hey, I was just in there, it's your turn. Like, it's like
Yep. Yep.
it's,
Mm-hmm.
you lose sense of yourself, you lose sense of your relationships, you lose sense of
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're in this weird fog. And for me, like, I guess I was in that sense kind of depressed, but the anxiety was really bad because I had that thing where I didn't ever want to be away from Julian, ever. I had to be holding him constantly. I had to be in the same room as him. I didn't want anybody else near him. Even Eric, who is a great dad, has been a great dad from day one. I would get this weird, like, chest tightening, couldn't breathe type of anxiety if I had to like be out of the house for any reason, knowing that the baby was totally fine with Eric home watching, but I couldn't not think about it. And like the thought of ever having to be away from him, just like crippling anxiety. I could not fathom being away from him, which is probably why he became one of those babies that like needed to be held to sleep constantly, because I didn't want to put him down ever.
I'm wondering, did like at the time, I mean, maybe it's hard to think now looking back, but like, um, did that feel natural at the time, or could you kind of like look at yourself from the outside and be like, this doesn't feel normal?
At the
Or
time, I felt like that's how all moms felt with their babies, right?
it's
Like I
just
just
okay.
assumed like, oh, like this is like mama bear mode, right? Like I don't want
Mm-hmm.
anyone around my kid. And it led to some, tension amongst family members and everything, because it was, and that's the thing, it was not anything personal against other people. It was just my own thing. And I knew that. So I guess that part from the outside, like I knew it was me. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I don't trust you around my kid because you're a bad person. It's I don't trust anyone around my kid except me. And so I put that extra pressure on myself. And I wasn't even breastfeeding, but I still was the one. I was like, I need to get up with him in the night. I need to be the one to go to him. I need to be the one to hold him, because I felt like no one else could do
Mm.
a good enough job. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it had to be me, because I was the only one who could, and I did that to myself. So looking back now, I realized that, but
Yeah.
it was extreme. And I even got like, I would start getting all worked up thinking about like distant future scenarios for no reason. Like I would start thinking about like, what am I going to do, if he's at a party in high school and he's drinking, and he wants to drive home, and like, and Eric would be like, why are you thinking about, like, he's 3 months old, like why are you thinking about things like
Mm-hmm.
15 years from now? But it's like that's just where my brain was going, and it was constant. It was, even when he was sleeping, I would lay awake with just my brain going. So I was super sleep deprived on top of it, which was not good for anybody, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's like nothing you can do at that point. And I've always struggled with racing thoughts and catastrophic thoughts, um, thinking worst case scenario type things. And that's part of my anxiety in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you add a baby to the mix, which is like your heart outside your body, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like all that internalized worry and fear and everything now has like a physical form that I'm just zoned in, like
Yes.
zeroed in on him. And I'm just like worried constantly. I don't know. It was really, really bad.
Well, and you're saying about like the pressure you put on yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I can relate to the pressure of like, you said it had to be you, it had to be you. And I
Mhm.
think that's where, I mean, yeah, tension can come into relationship too with your
Mhm.
partner is um I didn't want it to always have to be me, but I
Mhm.
felt the pressure that ultimately it was going to fall on me.
Right. Even
And
if your partner is not making you feel that way, like you're
no.
making yourself feel that way. And
I'm
I couldn't stop it.
exactly. You
Yeah.
cannot stop it. I mean, like there are definitely a few temper tantrums I threw in Hattie's room because I just was so sleep deprived
Mhm.
and I wanted someone else to be able to solve the problem, but I knew it had to be me and I just couldn't take it anymore. And then
Yep.
you feel bad for being that way, but like, yeah, I think one way or another, we just put an incredible amount of pressure on ourselves that
Mhm.
like nobody can take away. We just have to like work our way through it.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. I started going to therapy, kind of talked through it. I figured out, and as he got older too, it got a little easier because he did start sleeping a little better, not great. He's still not a great sleeper. But it wasn't constant, like needing to
Mm-hmm.
hold him all the time. So probably when he was about 8 months, it started to get a little easier. I started to relax a little bit. And it was a very good thing, because that was when my office opened up again and I had to start going back into work,
Mm.
which that was a whole other thing. But at least I wasn't, I mean, I think back to if I had to put him in at 3 months, like I did with Jamie, because, the world moved on. But like, because everything was shut down and I was working from home and kept him home with us, like it definitely helped in that regard. But I also don't know if it was detrimental. Like, I wonder if I had to send him back at 3 months, if I would have gotten past that postpartum anxiety quicker, because I wouldn't have had a choice, right? Like, I would have had to leave him in someone else's care. So because it was like around the 7 month mark when we started putting him in daycare, so I could go back to work, it was luckily I'd gotten through, I feel like, the worst of it. So it was still hard, very hard leaving him in someone else's care, but I quickly kind of came to terms with, and that was like a whole other, we could talk about childcare, I guess, in another episode, because I'm
I know,
curious
I was just thinking
the
when
differences between obviously like daycare versus, I know some people have their kids in home while they work with like a nanny, and I know stay at home moms, like there's so many different paths you can go down.
Mhm.
And I'd be curious to, yeah, kind of deep dive into that. So, but yeah, that was kind of when things started to get a little better, and I started to feel more like myself again. I started, working out more and like getting out of the house and like doing things for me, and my mental health just as a whole started to get much better. And then Jamie came along, about, yeah, like a year and a half later. So when Jamie was born, I was kind of mentally preparing myself, because I was like, all right, been down this road before. I know my mental health is gonna about to take a nosedive with with everything. So
Mental
I
health, we don't know her anymore.
I was just like, all right, let's remember, our coping mechanisms and all that. So, but completely different experience. So here I was thinking about all the anxiety stuff that I experienced with Julian, and with Jamie, complete opposite. I did not feel a connection with him, like you were saying. Like with Julian, when he was born, it was like immediate connection. I think that's another thing with the anxiety. I felt so, he's mine. I'm the only one that can care for him. I'm the only one who can love him this much. Like it was very much like a cute aggression. And when Jamie was born, it very much for a long time felt like, I knew he was my baby. I was caring for him. I was loving him. I was, providing for him, all these things you do, but I didn't feel that same connection. And if anything, and I feel terrible saying this because he was very much planned and wanted, but I felt a resentment for a while because I felt guilty for having to like put Julian on the back burner, because he was my only baby, for 2 years, almost 2 years at that point, and he was too little to understand what was going on, and just knowing how like his world was about to shift and change and never be the same, and I felt such immense guilt about it that I took it out on Jamie. Like I like, instead of feeling guilty just personally for myself, it was almost like, well, it's your fault, like kind of thing. And I never, took it out on him in the sense of like I was neglectful in any way, but I feel like I directed that guilt and anger and resentment at him, which is totally unfair, right, to him. And I feel super terrible about it saying it out loud now, and I've kind of come to terms with it that it was the brain chemicals, right? Like that wasn't me saying that. That was like the postpartum hormones saying that. And I remember a few times on maternity leave just being like, I can't wait to go back to work. And I never had those thoughts with Julian. Like with Julian, I was like, I could stay with you forever. And with Jamie, I was like, when are you out of here? Because like I can't. But it was like awful, right? Awful, awful, awful. I still feel bad talking about it. My only solace is that like they're too little to have ever like felt like to know that. I'm hoping they didn't pick up on that, like I hope neither of them picked up on my weird mental health, and that they'll just remember, I know. I hope they both look back and be like, everything was great. And if they ever come across this podcast, and I hope Jamie doesn't realize that, or I hope that he realizes that it was not me, it was the hormones, and it was just something that I had to work through. And kind of like you, around like the 6 to 7 month mark, I finally started to feel that more like attachment to him. And it's hard because by all accounts, like my brain is like, this is your baby. This is, and like watching them together, it's like so heartwarming. And it's still, at the end of the day, like Eric and I switch every other night who puts which kid to bed, so that we're each taking turns. And for a long time, when it was my night putting Jamie to bed, I'd be, sitting there rocking him. He's all cute and sleeping on me and everything. But I could hear Julian in the next room with Eric, and they're like playing, and he's laughing, and he's running. And like my thoughts went to like, oh, like I'm missing out on that. And again, not blaming Jamie, but it was like that weird coming to terms with like, I'm not going to be there for both of them all the time now.
Yes.
And that was hard because when you have the one kid, it's like your focus is 100% them all the time. And with two, that's been something that I've grappled with. And I think that also led to the depression is like, how am I going to be there for both kids equally? At
Where
the
you
same
don't feel
time.
like one is taking you from the other. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, these are things I've already started to like worry about thinking into the future of, or just knowing that when you go from one to two, it's like no matter what you do, it's never quite the same, because it's like with that first baby, they were just everything and you're learning everything together.
Yeah.
And now it's like I think of bedtime routines, and I think like, okay, if I'm lucky enough that like I'll be able to nurse our second baby, maybe exclusively, who knows, that's going to take me away
Mm-hmm.
from Hattie. And it's like, I don't know, things will just never quite be the same. So I can imagine how, I don't know, how much pressure that creates going from
Yeah.
one to two, especially with your oldest not being very old, like still
Right.
a
And that's the thing is
toddler.
I've had friends who had, their second one and their first kids were a little bit older and kind of understood to a point. I mean, not
Mm-hmm.
the full concept, but at least knowing like, oh, there's a baby coming and we got them a pretend baby so they could take care of the baby while I'm taking it. And like I'm like, he doesn't understand any of it. Like I tried. I remember people being like, oh, is he excited for the baby? I'm like, he's not even two yet. He doesn't understand any
And
of
he is a
this.
baby.
Yeah, he is a baby in every sense of the word. Like he still fully relies on me for everything. And
Mm.
um I think that was the hard part was feeling that guilt of not being there for Julian like I could be in the same capacity and taking that to like being Jamie's fault. Which again, feel awful saying that, but like that's how my brain was processing
Yeah.
everything. And it's gotten a lot better. And I think a lot of that too is like their relationship is really cute and heartwarming to watch because in the beginning, obviously, Julian was like, who's this baby? Why is he here? Like, that's my mom. Like, what are you doing?
Stranger
And
danger.
yeah, like, that's my mom. Get out of here. Take this baby back. Like, he couldn't verbalize any of that, but I'm sure that's what he was thinking.
Mm.
And now they're like little best friends. Like it's gotten to the point where Julian like bypasses me completely and just runs to Jamie. Like first thing in the morning, where's Jamie? After every nap, where's Jamie? And picking him up daycare, where's Jamie? And then he runs him and gives him kisses. And I'm like, can mommy have a kiss? No, it's just Jamie all the time. So I do love that, and that's probably what's helped kind of get me out of that funk because
Yes.
instead of framing it as like I can't do this for him or I took this away from him or and I can't give him my full attention. Now it's like, but look what I've given him. I've given him this little playmate and I've given him, a buddy for life kind of thing. And I've given him that companionship that like you can't necessarily get from a parent and you need from like a sibling or a peer kind of thing. So it was it took some work to kind of switch my thinking in that, but I mean, I wouldn't change it. Obviously, like I wouldn't change any of it, and it's heartbreaking, like you said, to look back and feel like I missed out. Like my whole maternity leave with Jamie, all I could think of was like, I can't wait for this to be over. And now I'm like,
Mm.
I wish I had taken advantage of that one-on-one time with him because I don't get one-on-one time with him anymore, right? Like they're always together now. So
Well, and you saying that, it's like really got me thinking if like that may be a great, not a great way, but like an easy way to define postpartum depression is like time, right?
mhm,
Because I was thinking back, and I didn't share earlier that when Hattie was around, yeah, okay, it would have been like getting up to 2 months, and you're at your major like peak of sleep deprivation after being in it for a few months. And I would do this thing with my therapist where it'd be like, okay, if I can just get to 7 weeks, if I can just get to 8 weeks. And it was like this thing I was crawling through of like, make it to this next stage and things will be better. And I
mhm,
wanted time to pass. And
mhm,
then one day, it's like you don't want time to pass anymore. You realize how precious it is. And all you want to do is like just stay, you know.
Yeah.
It's like the
Free
last few
time.
months I'm like, I just want her to stay a baby forever. I'm not the type of parent that's like pushing for their next stage of development. I'm like, she'll
Hmm.
get there when she gets there. I don't want her to grow up, you know. And
Yeah.
for me, and it sounds like for you too, of like when you were itching to get back to where you wanted time to pass, and then it's like when
Mhm.
you start feeling better, you're like, please stop the clock.
Oh yeah. About a month ago. Yeah, because so Jamie just turned 8 months. So about a month ago, around like 7 months, I had like this moment of like clarity where I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I should take them, like I should take them out of daycare and keep them home with me. Like I should do the whole stay-at-home mom thing because they are at the point now where it's like they have like they're both in a good space. I'm in a good space mentally, and it's like all I want to do is be with them now all the time. So it's like I feel like and part of me is like, but am I only feeling that way because of our current situation and like
Mm.
my mental health couldn't handle being home with both of them all day every day? So I don't know if it's the whole grass is greener on the other side thing. And like, again, we can kind of go into that more when we talk about our childcare slash working mom slash stay at home mom, whatever scenario. But it is one of those things where like, I think it finally took me to the point where I was out of that weird funk of depression where I was like, oh my God, I just want to be around my kids 24/7 and keep them home with me. So, and I didn't feel that way for a while. I was just like, get these kids out of here. Like, I need a break. So
Yes.
it's, yeah, it's weird how
No,
things just change
it's
overnight.
really something switches, and it's not. It's like you said. It could mean that you realize you want to stay home, or maybe it's just that you have a new appreciation. And I like a theme I came up with a few months ago when I started feeling just right about things was I am with her all the time, and it never feels like enough, you know.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's how I think it should feel.
yeah,
You know, whether you do end up doing that or you just feel it. You're at work and you're like, oh, I wish I could be with my kids, you know?
yeah.
Um, I mean, hey, if you decide to go that route, I definitely
But then I
support
look at
it.
days like today. I'm off work today,
Mhm.
and we still sent the kids to daycare.
But
But it's like,
honestly, like
you know,
also having time to yourself is what makes you a better, stronger parent,
yeah.
right?
And I
Like,
probably will pick them up early to be fair, because I do genuinely miss them.
yeah.
It's just like when the day was coming, and I was like, oh, their daycare's still open today. And I was like, should I give them home with me? And I was like, you know what? I need to like do stuff around the house, and
I need a
yeah.
podcast.
I need a podcast today. No, and like it is a weird sense of like yeah, again, I think it's the never ending mom guilt.
Mhm.
Like you put them in daycare so that you can have time for yourself, and then you're like, oh, but they should be home with me. And then I feel like if they were home with me all the time and I never had time for myself, I might, grow to, resent that, and then I would be like, well, that wouldn't be fair to them either. So it's never it's
It's
never good
never
enough.
ending guilt, guilt in
Yeah.
the present moment, guilt for what was, you know, and it's like, I think it will never go away, you know,
Mhm.
because we're moms forever now. So it's
Yeah.
just always going to be there. Um, but yeah, I hope that people hearing a bit of what we have experienced maybe just feel like it's normal to feel this way. You know, to feel extremely protective or disconnected or, you know, blaming people, babies irrationally.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. And I just feel so thankful that I'm on the other side of the things I used to feel.
Yes.
And knowing that some people struggle for so much longer or like postpartum comes in later. Oh, another thing I was thinking when we do talk about, yeah, childcare is how I wish in our country that the leaves could be so much longer because 3 months is like a terrible time to make a decision. I
Right.
think
And the first 3 months are the hardest 3 months. And then it's like,
yes.
why can't I have him home with me at like the 6 to 10 months? Because that's like a really fun time. And
Mm-hmm. Or if
yeah.
everybody could have a year to
Or
make the
that. Yeah.
decision, because so much has changed. And I think, if I hadn't upfront taken the year off, um, probably around 3 months, I would have been thinking, I think I should be back at work. I can't handle this. And then
Hmm.
it's like, give me a few more months. And now here I am, like choosing to stay home. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's never ending mom guilt.
Yeah. So, any other thoughts you have about your experience?
I mean, a lot of it was tied to my like feeding journey, which we could go more into that, but there was a lot of, like, I know I said with Julian, it was a lot of postpartum anxiety, but I do think I fell into like a deep hole of depression when I realized I couldn't feed, like, and when I gave up pumping on top of it, like knowing I couldn't breastfeed was a blow, but I was like, all right, I'm still gonna, try to pump and produce and whatever. And I wasn't making enough. So then we were supplementing with formula. And then it got to the point where I remember like being up in the middle of the night, just pumping and sobbing. And Eric was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I can't do this anymore." And I felt so guilty because I was like, here, it was coupled almost with the fact that I had a C-section because I pushed and pushed and pushed and he wasn't coming out. So once he sees it, I was like, I couldn't birth my baby,
Mm-hmm.
traditionally. I couldn't feed him traditionally, like with breastfeeding. And now I can't even like mentally handle the pumping aspect. I was like, I'm failing all around as like how nature intended me to be a mom kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a really hard part of that. And I know there's a lot of hormones too with like the milk production aspect. So when I decided to stop pumping and completely give it up, it was like, and then like you're still producing milk. So I had to go through the whole process of like weaning myself off the machine, and then I'd be like taking a warm shower and I'd start to leak, and then I would just burst into tears again because it was just like until they completely dried up, it was like a constant reminder of like what I was giving up in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard to come to terms with. And like Eric had to keep reminding me, he's like, you're not like, all that matters is he's fed, right? Like formula's fine. Like we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna handle it. It's fine. But it was still just like that weird maternal thing of like, I can't provide for my own baby. And so with Jamie, at least that was one positive. Is I went into it being like, if this kid can't latch from like day one, we're just going straight to formula. And I'm like, I'm not even dealing with the pump because that was too much for me. So
Yeah.
that spared me in that regard of like my mental health because I was already suffering with the guilt and depression of like having the second baby. But at least I didn't go down that dark hole of feeling like a failure. So
Yeah, I feel like since becoming a mom and learning so many more people's stories, feeding is a huge aspect of it. And so often, like you're saying, moms that desperately want to do this one thing and can't. And I think that's where I found myself a little isolated. Was this is something I can do, but didn't necessarily want to do. Like at one point, we were gonna really just, I think around 3, right before the refusal, gonna try to taper her off to just bottle feeds because we were hoping it would help with like the reflux more and less on me. But like once I learned to accept it all and just realize how precious that bond is that so many people don't get to have, I'm like, okay, well then how am I ever going to end this journey? Because it means so much to me.
Yeah.
And I know how precious it is, and I don't know. So yeah, I'll check in a few months and see where I'm at, but chances are I'll still be breastfeeding.
Hey, you know what? You do what's best for you and you do what's best for your baby, and that's all you really can do.
But yeah, we hope to continue the conversation, whether that's in our next episode or future, and getting other people to share as well. So if you're out there wanting to share your postpartum experience, we are here for it.
Yes.
And hopefully hear Nicole's too.
Yes.
Because I know she has mentioned struggles with after both of her girls. So yeah, hopefully this wasn't too heavy. I feel like we brought light with the heavy.
Yeah. And that's kind of my coping mechanism in general in life is I try to like turn things into humor. It's like that's just how I've always been, and that's why. And I'm really, I mean, you know, in order to not cry, I laugh. So that's maybe unhealthy in certain times, but it helps in cases like this, so I don't just burst out into tears on camera. So.
But also look at us, because we did get to that other side. It's like we can talk about stuff without
True.
Bursting into tears. It's
That's
like,
a good point. Once you're out of it, it's a lot easier to look back and find like the humor in things. But I mean, I have pictures. I think actually that Facebook post you were talking about. I think I commented on it, and I have a picture of me holding Jamie because he was only like a month old, I think, at the time. Because Hattie and Jamie are only like what, 3 months apart, 4 months
less
apart.
than, yeah.
Oh, something like that, where I think it was like he was still very young at that time. And I have a picture that I had taken of holding him, and like he's crying and I'm crying, and I'm just like, yeah, when you're in that moment, it feels very dark.
A lot of dark moments, but here we are on the other side, and not to say there won't still be hard times, but
different hard times.
We are living proof that you get to the other side eventually, even if it takes many months.
Say it could take therapy, it could take medication, or it could just take time, but you won't feel that way forever. That's what I tell myself.
It's been a great podcast, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Cheers!
See you next time.